Here's a pitch on the way. He swings and fouls it off, and the man from Walla Walla will take that one home.
Swing, there's a drive to left. That one is long gone.
Now, I might have been a small part of your life, but you've been a very large part of mine. And it's my privilege and honor to share with you the greatest game of all.
What's going on, nation? AJ Reilly here again with another episode of The Corner. Quick turnaround here because the Tigers are taking on the Guardians for their final series of the year, starting with a doubleheader on Monday. So we're cranking out the content to make sure that we get you that recap from Chicago, which was frustrating, and right into this next series with the Cleveland Guardians. I also got a leadoff for you and some thoughts about who might not be on this roster next season and maybe some replacements or some names to keep in mind when we talk about those type of things. But before we get into any of that, I do want to remind you, make sure you hit that like button, click subscribe, and pound that bell to get notifications from Detroit Sports Nation. You can also follow The Corner on Twitter at DSN at The Corner for all of your baseball news. And as we start the show every week, we start it with the leadoff, and there's no other leadoff that we need to talk about other than Fernando Tatis Jr. and being popped for PEDs, an 80-game suspension, which will take him to about May of next year. He will not play baseball this year, and it's devastating for a number of reasons, but mainly for the fact that you have someone who is essentially the face of baseball, or was in position to become the face of baseball. A very, very, very good player, a charismatic player, an energetic player, bit of a cocky player, that now will not play at all this season when his team needs him to play, and won't be playing for the beginning part of next year as well. And listen, I'm in the business of second chances in a lot of ways. I believe that when people pay their penance, they deserve second chances. So I hope that this is something that isn't held against him, but it blacklists him a little bit. It puts a black mark on the reputation, and what makes it worse is the excuse. And maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it's a societal thing, I don't really know, but it's the excuse of, oh, I was taking this unknowingly to treat a different condition. When it come to find out, what he said he was taking was not actually what you take to treat that condition. Yes, the words are close, but they're not the same. And in a lot of ways, it seems as if it would just be better to be like, yep, I screwed up. I apologize. It'll never happen again. Now, there's no evidence that Tatis had been taking this while he was playing, and there's very good reason to believe that the use of PEDs was for a faster recovery to get back with the team who made all of the moves at the deadline, who put themselves in a position for a wild card spot because they are incredibly behind the Los Angeles Dodgers in the NL West. But now they're going to be without their star shortstop, the shortstop that they signed to a 14-year, $340-something million contract. So a big loss. A big loss for the Padres, to be sure. A big loss for the fans who will not be able to see Tatis play and play in the playoffs, most likely. But also a big loss for baseball, because one of your brightest young stars is now out for 80 games. It's frustrating. And I don't know where you come down on the PED use. I don't know where, you sit as far as these guys being able to be in the Hall of Fame or not. And I'm not saying that Tatis was a Hall of Famer yet, because he still had a long way to go to prove that. But it just is unfortunate that these things keep happening without accepting responsibility for our actions. Oh, I was taking this to treat this condition, but it ended up showing up on the test. No, what you actually were taking were PEDs. Just own up to it, man. Just be a man. Just own up to it. Yeah, I took them. Okay, great. Thanks for admitting you're wrong. Let's move on. That's the thing, right? Is people are much more willing to forgive a wrong when you accept responsibility for that wrong. But when you dance around an issue, when you skirt around an issue, when you fail to accept responsibility for an issue, all you do is dig the hole deeper. All you do is show the immaturity that people are now starting to question, which brings up a whole nother batch of questions. And listen, I like watching Tatis play. He's very exciting and a very good player. He's good for the game of baseball. But what I don't appreciate is the inability to accept responsibility when we do wrong. Nobody is perfect. People deserve second chances. But second chances aren't handed out like bubblegum. Second chances start with accepted responsibility for wrongdoing. You screwed up. People screw up. It happens. But accept the responsibility. Don't make up an excuse. Don't make up excuses. And that's where we're at with this whole thing. Andy Pettitte, long ago, accepted responsibility for screwing up. He's not necessarily considered in those conversations anymore. People are generally forgiving if you accept responsibility for the wrongdoing. So 23 out in San Diego, I hope that you get it right. I hope that you have these 80 games to reflect on the fact that you screwed up. And in screwing up, there's possibility for redemption, and that redemption comes from accepting the responsibility that you own in this situation. Wear it a little bit. But come back better. Get healthy. Stop taking the PEDs. Don't skirt the system. Play the game. That's all that we need. That's all baseball needs. That's all fans need. Accept responsibility. Come back and be the player that we know that you are. A player that, is not featured in Detroit, for sure. And the question has to be asked. SOT? You might be like, what? What? AJ, what? SOT? Yeah, we got SOL on the football field. Maybe now we have an SOT on the baseball diamond, because this team, another sweep. Second series in a row that they've been swept, and potentially staring down the barrel of their third sweep in a row. But we'll talk about that in the preview. Let's recap this same old Tigers in Chicago situation. The Tigers are not good. Not good. They are 20-33 against the AL Central. But I say SOT because they're 3-9 this season against the Chicago White Sox. And throughout the last few years of history, they have been awful against the AL Central. The Tigers now sit 43-73. 30 games. 30 games below 500. A few weeks ago, I feel like it was a few weeks ago, might have been a month, probably was a month, but I was like, man, 15 games is the lowest you can go below 500. Nope. We'll double it. We'll go to 30 with no end in sight. Now the third worst team in baseball. You have the Nationals, who were in a clear rebuild. You have the Athletics, who were in a clear rebuild. And you have the Tigers, whose rebuild was 100% over. No. No, it's not. No, it's not. And that sucks. Big time, that sucks. Let's get into the games. Daniel Norris pitched game 1. Did a great job to get through 5 innings. Actually, competed with Michael Kopech. Kopech was dynamite. 11 Ks through 5 innings, which is another whole storyline that we're going to talk about. And no hit the Tigers through 6. Was only at, I think, 85 pitches through 5 innings, which is high, but that's going to be elevated when you have that type of strikeout numbers. Was pulled for the 7th, 8th, and 9th. Tigers ultimately do end up getting a hit, so they're not hitless. But they did end up losing 2-0 and being shut out for the 16th time this season. And it was brutal. 14 total Ks. Again, another 3-game series where they struck out 39 times. Game 2 was no better. They lost 6-4. They lost primarily because of a controversial call in the 7th inning, which led to manager A.J. Hinch being tossed. Unceremoniously tossed, by the way. It looked like Javi Baez tagged Jose Abreu. It looked like it. But none of the angles that they showed on replay were clear enough, I think, to overturn that. And in reality, listen, Javi knew that he got him. And he made sure that when he was called safe, they were checking the replay. I get it. But missing the moment of Abreu coming off the bag completely and not keeping the tag on him was a miss. There would have been no doubt at that point. And Javi's great when it comes to tags and slapping tags and getting and stealing outs in a lot of ways. But that was a miss. Vaughn comes up off Jimenez. Vaughn just seems to hit the ball where they ain't every time we're playing them. But man, oh man, they ended up losing 6-4. Then game 3, Tyler Alexander struggled. He said, I just didn't have it, but I fought through it, and he did fight through it. They ended up losing 5-3. And they were winning 3-2, I believe it was, when they had an inning-ending double play in the 5th inning, but Cody Clemens stretched the wrong way at first base and dropped the double play that would have gotten them out of it. At that point, the game was 3-2. Then Willie Peralta let up 2 more runs. It's 5-2. Harold Castro hits a home run in the top of the 9th, which brings the score to 5-3. And a lot of that is due to players that are just not good at the positions that they're put in. And it's not necessarily their fault. Listen, Cody Clemens is not a first baseman. He's done a phenomenal job of adjusting and trying to learn the position. But when the moment is biggest, to have that kind of mistake is a problem. In the 8th inning, Eric Haas, who's not spent much time in left field, slips and the ball gets past him and runs score. Yeah, that's on Haas, right? Go to the ball under control, gather your feet. I understand all that. But this speaks what we've said many times. This roster and the way that it's constructed is so bad. There's so many holes that you've got people playing out of position. And ultimately, it led to a sweep. And it led to, another 39 strikeouts in 3 games. Averaging 13 a game, which is never going to win you ball games. But let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's look at this. Remember back July, I forget the date, July something, where the Tigers won 6 games in a row. And we're like, oh, nice. We're going to shave Ramon Santiago's head. We won 6 games in a row. They've won a total of 7 games since then. 33 games since that winning streak. They're 7-26. They've now lost 7 games in a row, going back to the last game in against Tampa Bay, 3 against the Guardians, and now 3 against the White Sox, which is their largest losing streak of the season. And I thought with heads rolling, with Avila being dismissed, that might shake things up and kind of put people on notice. But there just seems to be a flatness about this team right now. No spark, really. I mean, Scope had one of the most pathetic at-bats in Game 2 in the late innings with Kerry Carpenter on second base. Carpenter got his first Major League hit, which is some silver lining for this series. Congrats to him. But then Scope, right behind him, just whiffs at the ball 3 times, not even close. And we're going to talk a little bit about Scope coming up. So it's brutal. 7-26 in their last 33. 7 losses in a row, and it doesn't get any better. Because they're starting a series in Cleveland that starts with a doubleheader on Monday. 3-10 is going to be Game 1. And then following that will be Game 2. So we're going to look at the pitching matchups, and then we'll just talk through, some Cleveland Guardian things. But Game 1 in the afternoon, 3:10, Drew Hutchinson, who's been soldiering on and doing a pretty good job, is going to be facing off against Aaron Savali. Now, Aaron Savali on the season is 2-5 with a 6.05 ERA. But, against the Tigers, in his career, he's 7-0 with a 2.11 ERA and a .78 whip. He has a 181 batting average against and a 200 batting average on balls in play. In other words, when Aaron Savali pitches against the Detroit Tigers, he is Cy Young. It is not going to be an easy trek Monday afternoon. At all. I don't know why his stuff plays up against us. I don't know why it has life. But for whatever reason, we are the team that he dominates. That's Game 1. Game 2, Brian Garcia is going to come back and pitch. He's going to be added to the roster as that extra man to pitch in the nightcap. And he's going to be facing off against Cleveland's number 20 prospect, Xavion Curry. That is the report that's out, so that's what I'm going with. So I'm going to give you a little bit on Xavion Curry. In AAA, he's 3-1 with a 3.09 ERA and a 1.09 whip. But from MLB's prospect rankings, this is kind of the scouting report on him. They say Curry's fastball sits in the low 90s and touches 96 miles per hour, playing as a solid to plus pitch with all the characteristics that the Guardians covet. He releases it from a high arm slot with plenty of efficient spin and induced vertical break. And hitters couldn't catch up to his heater last year. That's not great for us with the whiffs that we've had on balls over the middle. Side note. He relies heavily on his four-seam, with his low 80s slider showing flashes of becoming an average pitch because he locates it well, and his downer curveball and changeup grading as fringy. So you're looking at a guy with a 4-pitch mix, but he's going to rely heavily on a four-seamer and a slider. Four-seamer and a slider. A little bit of a curve mixed in, a little bit of a changeup mixed in. But I'm telling you, if the Tigers do not jump and jump early, we could again have somebody making their debut and doing phenomenal against the Tigers. And this should make Tigers fans a little bit nervous because facing Savali in Game 1, who dominates us, as the numbers would suggest, and then, as we know, has been the trend when young pitchers start against the Tigers, they normally do well. That could potentially set up for 9 games lost in a row, being swept in a doubleheader. And it doesn't get much better from there. Now, Cleveland has technically to be determined on their probable starters for the series. But it sets up for Game 3 and Game 4 to be Zach Plesac, who pitched very well against us in Comerica Park last week. And then Game 4 would be Quantrell, who we've gotten to, who, been up and down with the Tigers a little bit this season. All I'm going to say is this. If the Tigers' approach at the plate does not change. If they cannot get the bat to the ball, it doesn't matter who's starting. I could go out there and start against them, and it would be the same thing if they're not making contact. And I understand that's hyperbolic, right? I get it, okay? No, I'm not going to go in there and dominate a major league lineup because I throw maybe 45 miles per hour with a very hittable knuckleball. That's it. That's all I got. All I got. But I was watching specifically Game 1 against Kopech. 95, yeah, it had a little bit of life, a little bit of arm side break. But we're talking about middle to middle up pitches that the Tigers just swing through. Like they're not going to bat with a wooden bat, but a bat made of Swiss cheese. If we cannot get the bat on the ball, it does not matter who's starting against us. And it's going to be a long series. The Guardians are the tops in the AL Central right now. One of the youngest rosters in the league. Because they're tough outs on the bases, because they create runs, and because they play some of the best defense in Major League Baseball. They come out of nowhere. We're not expected to be this good, but that's what makes them dangerous. Especially when we're looking at a 4-game series. We're not even going to be facing their 2 best pitchers, but are the odds-on underdog in this series. We're not facing Tristan McKenzie. We're not facing Shane Bieber. They pitched Saturday and Sunday. But I highly doubt the Tigers will be favored in any of these games. Because again, we go back to 7-26 in the last 33. And it all came to a head for me when I was watching the post game yesterday. Because the voice of positivity, the guy that always, stick it out, be patient. Craig Monroe, and I love SEMO. Clearly at a loss for words. Can't even really find anything positive to spin. Literally on his scorecard is counting out the number of times that they struck out, and he's like, I don't know at this point. It's very frustrating because unmet expectations are the seatbed of disappointment. And that's where we're at. So let's continue on this train of positivity and let's move to the peanut gallery. We have underperforming veterans. With a new regime coming in, see, this is one of those things that is just like, we got to make something happen here. Because there are, we played 116 games. So I'm going to try to do quick math. That's 46 games left. Right? Yeah. 46 games left. You would think over these 46 games that there would be guys that are like, my job's on the line. The new guy coming in, the GM coming in, has no loyalty to any of these players. Some of them are under contract. Sure, I get that. Like, Javi Baez is not going anywhere unless he opts out after 2023. Andrew Chafin technically could opt out this year if he wanted to. Eduardo Rodriguez cannot opt out until after 2023. Miguel Cabrera cannot be bought out until after 2023. But there's some guys. Jonathan Scope, who's got 1 year left on his deal. Jeimer Candelario, who's entering his 3rd year of arbitration, which is usually the higher number. Are the Tigers going to pay for the performance that they've gotten on the field this year? Now with Scope, they have to, right? They've signed a contract, it's guaranteed. So Scope most likely is not in jeopardy of not being on the team next year, but I bet his role changes. So let's look at some numbers, right? Candelario had a really good pandemic year, only 60 games. Seemed like he was fitting into the Tigers in the Major League role in 2021. And my good friend Tyler Cotilla wrote an article about Jeimer Candelario on Detroit Sports Nation, so make sure that you check that out. comparing those stats and really breaking it down from a scout's point of view. Fantastic article. But this year, Candelario, 10 home runs, 199 average, 72 weighted runs created, 28% below Major League average. A 24.2% K rate, which is a tick up from where it was in 20 and 21. But his base on balls percentage, his walk percentage is way down. Last year, he was at a 10.4% walk rate. This year, he's at a 6.1. And defensively, it's not like we're keeping him in the lineup for his glove. -2 defensive runs saved and -3 outs against average. It's not even a very good defender. With him coming up on his third year of arbitration, there is a very high possibility Candelario gets non-tendered and is not wearing a Detroit uniform next year. Now, his 162-game average projects him to be a solid MLB player, but do you take the chance or do you give that spot to somebody who maybe you sign? And we'll talk about some names. I don't know. Jonathan Scope, only 8 home runs this year, 202 average, 51 weighted runs created, which means he's 49% below Major League average. Striking out 22% of the time, walking 3.5% of the time, which is the third lowest in his career. But he's never truly been above 5% walk, so it's really not that big of a drop-off. But he's the opposite of Candelario, right? He's 7 defensive runs saved, 24 outs above average. So at least his defense is good enough to keep him in the lineup. But these are 2 players specifically that I would look for a shakeup. Victor Reyes is entering his second year of arbitration. Everybody else is young enough that they're going to be cheap enough if they were to be kept around. Now, some could get non-tendered for sure and just kind of start over and wipe the slate clean a little bit. Okay? But there's going to be a lot of decisions that this GM coming in has to make, and the biggest ones are going to be staring you on the screen right now. Candelario and Scope. What do you do with these guys? Now, there's some wish list free agents that are going to be available. I don't know if any of them would come to a Detroit, but maybe they will, depending on who the GM is and what the situation is. But it's been rumored that Carlos Correa is opting out of his deal. But, of course, why would he not opt out of his deal with that contract that Minnesota gave him? And I'm hoping that the next team that signs him does not give him that crazy of a contract, because it's not working out for Minnesota. They're second in the AL Central and most likely could miss the playoffs. Nolan Arenado from the St. Louis Cardinals could also opt out. Trey Turner's a free agent. Dansby Swanson's a free agent. Those are like wish lists, big wish lists. Like those are going to cost you a mint and maybe beyond the scope of reality. No pun intended. But another contributor to Detroit Sports Nation, one of our editorial manager, Bob Herman, suggested a reunion of sorts with Jose Iglesias, and I can't say that I disagree with him. First of all, I was on the train that thought that Iglesias should have never been let go to begin with, because we know the hole that shortstop has been for us, and why not keep somebody like Iglesias around? But Iglesias has been good this year. 3 home runs, but he's not a power guy. 314 average. 102 weighted runs created. A 336 weighted on base percentage. Defense seems to be a little bit down. -4 defensive run save, but that's better than Candelario. And 1 outs above average. He's also a 3.4 WAR player this year. Could you slot Iglesias into this lineup and say, as Bob argued, the 2-hole? Getting on base in front of guys who hopefully will have an uptick in production next year like a Javi Baez? Because there is an adjustment period coming from the National League to the American League. Could that then alleviate some pressure from Baez, if you slid him over to second base, and you're like, well, what do you do with Scope? Well, you're paying him for a year, and guess what he becomes? He becomes insurance against Torkelson to play first base because we know Scope has played first base, and could also be slid over to third base because we know that he has the arm for it. But this is what we're talking about when we talk about this roster, is there's so many holes. And yeah, there's players that can play multiple positions. But are you losing productivity when you have them play these multiple positions? Most of the time, yeah, you are. We saw it in Game 3 against the White Sox. Eric Haas in left field. Cody Clemens at first base. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens when this new GM comes in. And there are guys that are going to be fighting for a spot on this roster next year. So it would behoove this team over the next 46 games to show out. I don't know if they can necessarily, but if they want a job on a major league team next year, they need to show out. They need to show out in a major way. Because this is all an audition. These next 46 games are an audition. Whoever that GM is going to be looking at the production, specifically down the stretch. What type of players do we have? And how well can I construct this roster and get creative in a way that'll put a winning product on the field? For a decade, the Detroit Tigers were synonymous with winning. And now, in the next decade, they become synonymous with losing. The question is, who's going to change that narrative? I've had my thoughts, and I think that, we got to figure out who's going to be that guy to change the narrative. You got to turn the page. You got to move on. Can't keep writing this chapter, because this chapter needs the biggest of periods put on it and the fastest of page turns, because it's getting real old real quick. This has been The Corner. I am AJ Reilly. I will see you again before our next series with the Los Angeles Angels when they come to town. I do want to remind you to hit that like button, click subscribe, and pound that bell so you can get notifications from Detroit Sports Nation, because we cover everything. And don't forget to follow The Corner on Twitter at DSN at The Corner. I will see you before the next series, and as always, go Tigers.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a what? Yeah.